Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video I want to talk about a topic that is at the heart of a lot of discussion with retail Final Fantasy XIV right now. After the latest letter from the producer live, while there were definitely some things to be excited about, some quality of life and some new updates, there was also concern about the general content cadence of Dawn Trail, specifically around the announcement of no new ultimate coming in 7.3. I had been long time predicting that, assuming that at the very least they were going to aim for a 7.5 release, as that's what they wanted to do in Shadowbringers, and they just didn't pull it off successfully. But it was at the behest of the feedback of the raiders that were actually doing the content. That being said, no new ultimate isn't really the problem with patch 7.3, and while a lot of hardcore raiders and people who would have loved to have watched the world race would maybe argue otherwise, there's really a lot more happening at the heart of Final Fantasy XIV that probably needs to be looked at and adjusted, against some of the things that we've heard the developers and Yoshi P say that they even want to put their time investment in. So in this video, I'm going to be focusing on changes that I would like to see come to Final Fantasy XIV as a whole, and while I will have a couple of selfish ones that are really more targeted at me as a raider, I am looking at things that are more for the general populace, things that will improve the playability for more players than few. Now, obviously there's a few easy ones I could go for. I could talk about, unlimited housing or a catalog system for glam. Yeah, I could do that for the 18th billionth time, but I'd rather focus on other things that I don't often hear discussion about, but you maybe hear like something here or there, like somebody mentions it, but it's kind of one of those things where everyone around them goes, oh yeah, you know what, that would be kind of cool. And then it just kind of gets forgotten in the deeper pits of the feedback that Final Fantasy XIV received. I'm also going to be avoiding newer issues like, the lack of a lower difficulty for Tower and Cosmic Exploration progression difficulties. We just covered that in the live letter. They said they've seen the feedback of it. We know some things that are coming in those regards, so I don't think that's even worth the time in this video. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first topic I actually really want to focus on, because for me it is one of the most overlooked content things that they could do in 14 that I think would really feed a lot of the more casual player base, and that's in Fates. Fates are something that are inspired from decades of open world content and other MMOs. I think most people, especially when Final Fantasy XIV 2.0 first came out, would have likened them to Guild Wars 2's events in their open world. But there's plenty of games, or even Rift, there's just plenty of games that have done some sort of system around overworld content that rewards the player that is a little more automated. It's not like waiting for something to spawn for hours on end or anything like that. Well, sometimes it is, but most of the time it's not. So what do I want them to do with Fates? Well, honestly, I kind of just want them to touch up Fates as a whole and support the system more consistently. And you're going to find that's a running trend when it comes to this video. For example, I want them to add the newer systems to the older zones. I mean, shared fates, bicolor gemstones, the forlorns, bonus fates, heck, maybe even some new stuff. I especially feel this after playing Final Fantasy XIV Mobile, where they actually have these types of systems and more in the older world fates. And while fates will be fates, I definitely feel more motivated when you're giving me bonus objectives and bonus EXP, and I feel more rewarded for my time. Another thing, speaking of feeling rewarded for your time, is the amount of experience that Fates give. Fates have kind of had a rocky road when it comes to their EXP balancing since A Realm Reborn. I mean, we've abused these things through and through, whether it's just farming all the mobs and never actually finishing the fate, or finding some sort of loophole with ones that spawn really often in order to grind them out. I feel like that's put them in a position where they're not an attractive enough option for leveling, and I really want them to undo that. I think there are certain expansions in particular, especially Stormblood, that would benefit from increased Fate EXP, especially when you pull it alongside things like the Forlorn, bonus fates, etc., etc. But increasing the baseline for me, it should be a bare minimum. Bozia should have shown them that if you just provide a pretty steady amount of experience, that it will motivate players to go out and do it more and more than the systems they already have in place, which do motivate some players, but it's a lot more bursty at like the start of expansions, you know what I mean? And not so much prolonged over the course of an entire expansion, or even for players looking to go back and do old stuff. I'd also like to see new fate objectives. There's actually a single fate that has a different objective from all the rest, and it's in Stormblood. It's in, what's the name of the second zone? The Peaks. And it's basically to stop a boss from reaching its end point. while, you know, dodging its attacks, attacking it. It'll just keep moving along the point and you have to stop it. Now, that's obviously not the only objective I'd like to see more, and I even understand why we've only seen that objective a single time. But I would just like to see new Fate objectives. If you're going to support the system, make them a mite bit more interesting. Even if there's just one or two of those really special ones, and I don't mean these super Fates, I mean like things like the Stop the Boss one per expansion. They stand out, they become a talking point, and they draw people in, at least temporarily. Also, big thing with Fates, while yes, increased EXP would be great, and honestly the rewards have gotten a lot better, especially with the fact we have multiple mounts now that you can get with bicolor gemstones. I would like them to more frequently update rewards mid-expansion. I would like to see new crafting materials added to them. I would like to see new mounts being able to be grinded. This is especially motivated from the gathering tokens, which added 2 mounts back to back in subsequent patches. Huge surprise to me. And now I have to keep an eye on every patch to see, oh, are they going to add a new mount here? They're going to add a new mount there. This one could happen this expansion. Like I said, I was surprised by the gathering ones, but maybe they'll do it with Fates too. Because if you regularly support the structure by just adding updates, you don't even need to update the content. You just update the rewards. I mean, treasure maps have proven that time and time again that you can build dedicated communities around this kind of stuff and get people to keep engaging with these systems. That, stacked on top of everything else, would make Fates, again, a pretty big mainstay for players looking to do open world content as an alternative, further leveling, or for any rewards they might want to grind out. And a bit on the selfish side, duels? I mean, duels, foregoing the actual player doing the duel, there is a sense of camaraderie with the people around you and the people on the server when you, as the duelist, go in and they all come and watch you. Not to mention that it gives those players a buff. Probably the thing that made duels work best in Bozia was the fact that if the players actually stood there and cheered you on and watched you, they reaped some sort of reward as well if you were successful. And open world bonuses, the bicolor gemstones and EXP, even if you only do it in 1 or 2 zones, might not be a bad idea. I would definitely engage with open world content more, and I think if there are people like me out there doing it, there would also be other players who would be out there trying to reap those bonuses at the same time. So while I could definitely list off more things for Fates, that's just the first of a few topics I've got here in this. Next up we have apartments. Now, like I said earlier, housing, I could just say unlimited housing and we could be done with this, right? And yes, there are a lot of other things, the ability to clip through things a lot more. People already glitch the game or even use third-party tools to do a lot of funky housing stuff. And yeah, I think they should recognize that and just kind of lift some of the limitations on the editing, let people go a little bit wilder, you know? But apartments have long been a forgotten structure, and in a world where we never get unlimited housing, which is very likely the world we're in, I think this kind of needs to be revisited. The TARDIS housing is allowing you to change the interior of housing between sizes. You could have a large exterior and a small interior, or a small exterior and a large interior. I think I said that wrong the first time, but you understood what I meant. Apartments, they've talked about giving players the ability to pay for upgrades to medium or large interiors, just they'd have to design specific apartment sizes for that kind of stuff. And I really think they need to support that. The reason apartments aren't really as popular, even if a lot of people have them, they may not use them as much. They're so limited in terms of what you can actually do with them. On top of that, allowing an ability to upgrade an apartment to have a gardening plot would also be a very, very nice thing. I know people who do gardening and make decent gil off of it. Probably not thrilled to hear that suggestion, but I do think it's one of those things that even if you gave it to more players or the option to unlock it for players, it might not result in that much change. There's still a decent amount of effort behind it. It would just open the door for more people to get in. It would definitely hit your prices though, don't get me wrong. And while they could definitely do more with apartments, I think maybe some new venues for apartments that have better skylights or views or things like that. These things seem like bare minimums to me. So those are going to be the things that I, at the bare minimum, ask for with apartments. Then we get into dungeons. Now, dungeons have always been a tough topic. I'm not someone who misses having 2 or 3 dungeons per patch. I would generally do each dungeon once, be like, yeah, that's cool, and then not do it. So it's not really something that I understand super well, to say the least. I've had plenty of people criticize my takes on dungeons and how I don't really care about the loss of them, and I don't know why anyone else would. So I wanted to find a middle ground. While yes, for the average player, 2 to 3 dungeons per patch would definitely be ideal. Even 2 dungeons every other patch, just to keep the expert roulette having 3 dungeons, would definitely be welcome even for me. I would like them to opt back into using optional dungeons instead of forcing a new dungeon with every MSQ update. The one thing I miss about hard modes is not getting 2 or 3 dungeons. It's them revisiting past locations that they've wanted to update the stories on. And I would love to have that again. I would also say that there are plenty of locations in Final Fantasy XIV that we have experienced, we've seen entrances to, that all feel like they would make for dungeons or deep dungeons or something of the sort. And I'd like to see them, instead of constantly feeling like the dungeon in the story has to facilitate where we're going in the story, to go back and revisit those locations. Variant kind of gives them that opportunity, but Variant's probably a lot more resources to make for an individual dungeon, and I would like to see this maybe a few times in expansion to take us back and just give us an opportunity to really expand our worldview in Final Fantasy XIV. Speaking of Variant, I mentioned this one before, they really need a Variant roulette. I hate that they put so much effort into the Variant dungeons. They are really cool. They're great music, great aesthetics, and they kind of just fall to the wayside. Yeah, they're pretty valuable to farm if you're someone who has the patience to go back and do them now, because there's really no reason for anyone to go in unless they want to make Gil or they're completing the 12 paths for the first time. But I would much prefer having a Variant roulette where you queue in and it sets the dungeon, it sets the path that you have to take on the dungeon, and then treats it like a more standard dungeon that just has more options because it's 3 variants, 4 eventually, and all those paths in there. So you never really know what you're going to get. Not that they're all that drastically different. On top of that, I also, on the selfish front, think that maybe they should abandon the whole variant Criterion Savage thing. I would honestly rather, if they're going to make Variant, make it, add it to its roulette, just use it as a means to give the developers a way of expressing themselves creatively in dungeon format. But for Criterion, I'm not so attached to the idea of the Variant becoming a Criterion. I would be perfectly okay with them going back to old dungeons and making a Criterion of those, and then being able to release them more frequently because they don't really need to make as many new assets in order to do that. I'd rather they optimize workflow with the work they've already done via these roulettes and using old dungeons but beefing them up via the Criterion system, instead of making something brand new all the time and then only getting 1 per expansion. Yeah, sure, if you want to make the Criterion based on the variant when you do a new variant, absolutely. I think that's a perfectly okay thing to do. I would never say no to that. But I don't feel beholden to the idea of it only being that, is all I'm saying. Also, speaking of dungeons, deep dungeons. I have a few minor grievances with deep dungeons as a whole, but the big one is really just remove the Palace of the Dead Floor 50 requirement to unlock the other deep dungeons. Palace of the Dead Floors 1 to 50 are not hyper accessible. A lot of players just don't have the means to get through it. Nobody really queues for especially like 21 through 50, and most of those players aren't outfitted to solo it. So it being a requirement just means, yeah, maybe when you announce a new deep dungeon, players go, oh, I really need to get 1 to 50 done. But if they're not in a position to, circumvent those 2 other problems, they just kind of get left behind. And it seems to happen with a lot of people from my experience. So I would much rather they just remove the requirement. Okay, if you're not going to remove the requirement, add a duty support system just for Palace of the Dead Floors 1 to 50 at the bare minimum, just to make that initial 50 floors an actual learning experience that gives that player some sort of idea of what they're getting into without having to do it alone or wait a really long time for a queue. I imagine it working similar to duty support, with just like the 3 NPCs just follow you around wherever. They can't trigger traps, they can't aggro mobs, but when you approach something, they'll attack it. Obviously, that's not ideal. In deep dungeons, we do, even in the lower floors, avoid monsters in order to go a little faster. But it's better than having nothing, right? Or at least I'd like to imagine it is. They could technically add them for later dungeons too as an alternative EXP means. I'm a huge fan of alternate EXP means. I don't think we all need to be spamming dungeons. I don't think it needs to only be Bozia or only a deep dungeon. I'd like to see more methods. I don't agree with them nerfing Aglaya because I thought that was a perfectly reasonable thing to have in the game. So yeah, those are a few options, but I think they could definitely do with like a baseline update. In terms of wants for the next deep dungeon, I want to see them break the formula a little bit more. I don't want it to be sluggish at the beginning, like Eureka Orthos was, but I want to see events that excite me a little bit more. I've even in the past suggested having a leveling set for Deep Dungeon, meaning like you queue into Palace of the Dead leveling. And it's a 10-floor set with wildly more random things that are more for fun and less debilitating on the player. But then you have the dedicated climb, which is kind of like the high difficulty mode, where players can, you know, go in, and then it's a lot more of the straightforward experience. I would definitely like the average player experience to be the more fun, frolicky, kind of wacky experience than the dedicated hardcore experience, where that kind of randomness could actually be incredibly infuriating. Hey, maybe they do Deep Dungeon Savage one day and it's the combination of the two. I'm not that optimistic. We are kind of getting a Deep Dungeon Savage with a beefed up version of the final boss, which I also love as an idea, and I hope they do it in the future. Honestly, I kind of hope they go back and do it for the old Deep Dungeons retroactively, at the very least the one that has a floor 99 boss before this, and that of Eureka Orthos. But I'm not so optimistic. We all know that's probably not going to happen. And then a few last little things. The friends list, just literally anything better. I mean, I'm a little afraid after all the drama around the blacklist and all the things that happened there, but come on, like, we need a better friends list. And Grand Company, finish introducing the ranks, and honestly, at the bare minimum, just allow the increased ranks all the way up to Captain to provide discount on Grand Company items with rank. Yeah, add new Grand Company items as well. Figure something out that you think is valuable. Honestly, I just thought of it. I didn't even write this down. I just thought of it while doing this. Why not introduce a bicolor voucher / gathering voucher equivalent for Grand Companies that you update occasionally? You need 100 Grand Company vouchers. It's, I don't know, 50,000 per, I don't know, just pick a number. I'm just spitballing here. And 100 of them nets you a really cool Grand Company specific mount. You had one for each of the Grand Companies. Even players that just are brand new, they now want to go do that. That kind of overlaps with Fates, but it may even get people doing some of the other stuff that gives Grand Company seals. Or you could simultaneously buff the things that give Grand Company seals or make them a bit more tempting. I mean, that would mean gathering turn-ins and crafting turn-ins and expert deliveries and Fates and all that would become potentially more valuable to the average player and provide more long-term goals that are not specific to hardcore high-skill players. And I think that's all I'm really trying to do. I'm trying to open up more avenues for the average player to actually engage with the game without creating a barrier of entry. I want them to feel like they see these systems, they understand these systems, and they can engage with these systems. And maybe they won't make it anytime soon, but maybe if they want to log in for a little bit and start working on those fates for Mount A or work on some Grand Company seals for MP, creating these like micro objectives that players can work towards that are grindy, but are not like insurmountable grinds, like 1,000 carats from Occult Crescent or something like that, where you can maybe circumvent it a little bit by spending a bit of gil. So maybe you just focus on gil one day and you focus. It just allows you to mix up the way you decide you want to play. But most of the things I've suggested here don't actually require creating brand new game assets or gameplay assets. They require more UI assets and back-end support. And while that's not easy, it's probably better than trying to say, oh, you know, we need an entire like Mythic Plus system or something of the something that's like focused on really deeper end game engagement and a lot more visual assets being required. I'm trying to work with what they've already made, build on top of those, and create more experiences for the player to choose between when they log in. I'm sure I could name a bunch of other random stuff. I have been for years in my videos. Whether or not you've been paying attention, you may think I'm a 14 stan, but I do regularly criticize and ask for things that are different. I just don't rage or foam at the mouth about it. But we're at a point where I think they actually really need to consider these things more than ever. The CEO is looking at them like, hey, you know, I noticed Dawn Trail ain't doing as hot as your previous expansions. And while there could be a lot of reasons, I still don't want that to happen. You know what I'm saying? So these are just some things that I feel would help. Obviously, yes, some people would just want a better story. Some people didn't enjoy Dawn Trail quite as much as they would have liked, or they would have preferred, especially difficult after Endwalker. Yes, unlimited housing. Yes, all the stuff we were talking about. I'm beating the point home over and over again at this point. So I think it's time we wrap up the video. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let me know what some of your ideas that you think fit into the theme of this video would be, and if and how you think they would benefit the Final Fantasy 14 community as a whole. But anyway, that's going to be a wrap. Thanks for watching. I'll see all of you in the next one. And until then, take care.